Good morning. It is Thursday, October 8th, 2020. I'm Pastor Thor Ramsey with Center Church. This is Gospel for 5, where we take 5 minutes out of our day and focus on the gospel and the one who saved our souls. We have been going through the book of Galatians, Paul's letter to the Galatians, verse by verse, because this is about the gospel. This book presents the gospel. So yesterday we were really talking about this idea of pushing through the fear of man in terms of, well, the idea is our main motivation to please people or to please the God we serve? Because it's hard to be effective witnesses for the gospel if we're primarily concerned about being well-liked or being popular. So I will say this, I think one of the most effective ways to push through something is to find a section of Scripture, like this right here, I would say, or find a section of Scripture and then just put keyword highlights and then check on that throughout the day or pray through that, because it's this idea that is scriptural, is that as we immerse our minds in our souls in the scriptures and pray through them, that's how breakthrough actually happens. It becomes, if we're trying to make it second nature, if we're trying to overcome something, just the way it says, resist the devil and he'll flee from you. It's the same idea. These things don't happen instantaneously. It's progressively most often in the Christian life. We're not delivered instantaneously from a particular mindset or from a particular habitual sin often, or from a particular struggle, in this case, the fear of man. So if the fear of man is something we want to overcome, then the best way to do that is by focusing on verses that deal with the fear of man, because then when it comes up, those verses will be more at the forefront of our minds rather than in the back of our minds, and we think of them after the circumstance. Right? If you're in a public place and something comes up. It just happened to me this morning. I got my hair cut. In vitro fertilization came up, and I could have just very gently said, well, I'd have to think. That's a problem saying it spontaneously, but the idea is this. God's hand was evident in vitro fertilization. My brother-in-law called my wife the night before she went in for our 6th try of in vitro fertilization and said, God woke me up last night wanting to pray for you. I don't know what's going on, but I prayed for you just to let you know. The next day she went in, had the procedure, and that's really, that's the baby she gave birth to is our oldest daughter, Eden. That's the baby she gave birth to. So I could have just shared that very succinctly, very briefly, bringing God into the conversation, not fearing man, right? But because I'm thinking, how do I say this? How are they going to react to this? That whole thing, that whole momentary fear, then the moment passed. It was too late. That type of thing. So to overcome something like that, and I'm saying we all have to overcome this in our lives. Billy Graham shared about sitting on a plane, sharing the gospel on the person next to him and how he struggled with that. Billy Graham, who preached to millions of people the gospel. He preached to thousands of people in one setting, presenting them the gospel. And he did it in a bold way. But here's Billy Graham sitting on a plane next to a stranger, struggling with the fear of man. It's something we all have to overcome. And again, I think one of the best ways to do that is to focus on a section of Scripture, focus on it, meditate upon it, pray through it, and that's how we press through some of these things. So one more time. For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ. We should really focus on some of these verses, because that is so convicting if we want to grow in our usefulness to God regarding the spread of the gospel of his Son and the truth that this world needs. Now, what has God said to you today?